Today I'm going to tell you a story from the American West in 1877, where an entire town saw a blind girl as nothing more than a burden, a piece of property to be traded like land. But in the very moment when her fate seemed sealed, a mysterious cowboy rode in, lifted her onto his horse, and defied both the law and the powerful men of the town. Why did he risk everything? And what happens when love, betrayal, and the fight for freedom collide in the burning desert? This is a story you won't forget. And if you enjoy timeless emotional tales like this, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next chapter. The sun burned high above Redstone Square, a pitiless gold coin hammered into the pale New Mexico sky. Heat shimmered on the dusty ground, curling posters that flapped against the wooden posts. They read in bold black letters, "Marriage contract Emily Warren to wed Silas Brand, May 18th, 1877. Approved by Sheriff Dugan. Witnesses welcome." The whole town had gathered, as if spectacle were a kind of Sunday sermon. Mothers shaded their children's eyes, though they peeked anyway. Ranch hands leaned on corral rails, whispering with nervous amusement. The piano player from the saloon stood with his hat tilted back, muttering, "Poor blind girl. At least she'll be taken care of." On the steps of the courthouse stood Emily Warren, 18 years old, clad in a faded white dress her aunt insisted was appropriate for the occasion. Her auburn hair, braided neatly, hung over her shoulder, but her sightless eyes stared past the crowd toward nothing. She held a simple cane in her hand, its wood worn smooth from years of use. Beside her, Martha Warren, her aunt and guardian, fussed with a lace parasol, her lips pursed like she was chewing bitterness. And looming on the other side stood Silas Brand, the cattle baron, who could buy and sell most of Redstone with the flick of his wrist. He wore a fine black coat, despite the heat, silver conchos gleaming on his belt. His smile was broad, but his eyes cold, as though the girl beside him were not flesh and blood, but acreage measured in fence lines. Sheriff Dugan, a stout man with a belly that strained against his vest, stepped forward with papers in hand. He cleared his throat, sweat already trickling down his temples. By agreement of guardian Martha Warren, and by the good graces of Mr. Silas Brand, he began, "We are gathered to witness the lawful binding of Emily Warren into matrimony. This union shall ensure her well-being, her inheritance, and the stability of Redstone." A murmur ran through the crowd. Some nodded approval. Others looked away, uncomfortable. Emily stood still, chin lifted. She could not see their stares, but she could hear every shuffle of boot, every whispered judgment. She gripped her cane tighter. Dugan continued, voice pompous. "As Miss Warren cannot provide for herself due to her condition, it falls to her family to secure her future. What greater future than in the house of Mr. Brand, a man of standing wealth and power over every poor soul in this town?" Someone muttered, though not loud enough to claim ownership of the words. Silas chuckled, smoothing his mustache. "Don't drag this on, Sheriff. Let's get the girl's mark and be done." But before the pen could be pressed into Emily's hand, the crowd shifted. Heads turned. Hooves clattered against the hard-packed street. From the western road rode Jack Colton. Tall in the saddle, broad-shouldered, his hat pulled low. The sun caught the line of his jaw and the glint of the revolver at his hip. Dust trailed behind his horse, a dark bay named Shadow. He was only 30, but already carried himself with the calm gravity of a man who had seen too much. His shirt was plain, sleeves rolled to the elbow, forearms bronzed and corded with muscle. Women's eyes followed him. Men straightened unconsciously. Jack dismounted with easy grace, the spurs at his boots chiming. He walked forward, shadow long, across the square. His gaze went not to the sheriff, nor to Silas, but straight to Emily, though she could not see it. "This ain't right," Jack said. His voice cut the murmur like a whip crack. The sheriff bristled. "What's this? Who are you to interfere with lawful proceedings?" Silas sneered, his smile turning mean. A drifter with more hair than sense. Move along, boy, before you find yourself cooling in the jailhouse. Emily's Aunt Martha clutched her parasol tighter, color rising in her cheeks. Sheriff, arrest him this instant. He has no say here. My niece cannot live alone. She'll starve or stumble into a well if she isn't cared for. Mr. Brand is doing her a mercy. Jack ignored them all. He stepped closer to Emily. The crowd parted just enough, breath held watching. Emily heard the tread of boots stop before her. She tilted her head slightly, listening. The man's breathing was steady, not like Silas's impatient snorts or the sheriff's huffing. She sensed something different. I don't know you, she whispered, voice trembling yet clear enough for those nearest to hear. But I know their lies. The words hung in the air, heavier than the heat. Silas's face darkened. Martha gasped in outrage. The sheriff sputtered. Jack's eyes softened. In one smooth, almost reverent motion, he bent and lifted Emily into his arms. She weighed little, all bones and quiet defiance. For the first time in her life, she did not feel like a burden she felt carried. Gasps erupted from the crowd. Hats tipped back, mouths opened. Jack strode to his horse, set Emily gently upon Shadow's saddle, and swung up behind her, his arm steadying her. He tipped his hat once toward Father O'Rourke, who stood frozen at the edge of the steps. The priest, after a long pause, raised his hand and crossed himself. Colton. Sheriff Dugan roared, fumbling for his revolver. Bring her back this instant. But Jack was already turning Shadow, with a firm tug of the reins. The horse snorted hooves, striking sparks from stone. Silas lunged forward, voice venomous. She's mine, you worthless tramp. You can't steal what's bought and paid for. Jack's reply was calm, dangerous. A woman ain't land, Brand. And she sure as hell ain't for sale. With a kick, Shadow leapt forward. The crowd scattered as horse and riders surged down the main street, dust billowing behind. Emily clung to the saddle horn, heart hammering. Wind whipped her braid across her cheek. She felt Jack's arm steady around her waist, his voice low by her ear. Hold on. I've got you. Behind them, the sheriff's shout echoed through the square. Bring them back, dead or alive. The mesa glowed with the last fire of the day, sky painted in rose and copper. Shadow's hooves struck soft thuds against the hardpan as Jack guided the stallion higher onto a ridge that overlooked miles of desert scrub. Heat was ebbing, traded for the cool breath of night. Emily sat before him in the saddle, spine stiff with unease. The rhythm of the horse unsettled her at first, but Jack's steady hand on the reins and quiet voice behind her steadied her. Feel the sway, he murmured. Don't fight it. Let your body go with the horse. She tried gripping her cane across her lap, like a talisman. Her world had always been still, measured by rooms and walls. The motion of the stallion felt like stepping into chaos. Jack placed his hand lightly over hers. Here, he said gently. He shifted her palm to Shadow's thick mane. This is your guide. Feel how his neck moves. Every step tells you where he's headed. Emily breathed in, catching the scent of horse sweat and dust. She pressed her fingers into the coarse hair, listening to the cadence of hooves. Slowly, her shoulders eased. Now Jack continued, say his name. Horses know voices better than reins sometimes. Shadow, she whispered, hesitant. The stallion flicked his ears back, acknowledging her. Emily smiled faintly, surprise flickering across her pale face. There you go, Jack said. Talk to him. He'll follow. For a moment, the world opened wider than it had ever been. Emily felt the mesa breeze lift her braid, the saddle creak beneath her, the living strength of the horse beneath her palms. She was not being carried anymore. She was feasting. As the last light faded, Jack led them into a shallow canyon, where mesquite bushes offered cover. He dismounted, helped Emily down with careful strength, then tied Shadow to a branch. The air smelled of sage and cooling stone. Emily brushed her dress free of dust, tilting her head toward the sound of footsteps on gravel. "You move quieter than most," she said. "But you're heavier than you look." Jack laughed softly. "So you can size a man up without seeing him." "I can hear impatience in Silas's stride," she replied, "and greed in my aunt's voice." "Yours?" "I hear hesitation." Jack paused, struck by her words. He opened his mouth to answer but stopped when a faint rustle came from the ridge above. "Stay here," he whispered. He climbed the slope with cat-like caution, hand near his revolver. A figure crouched there, shawl pulled over her head. It was Rosa Martinez, the maid from the boarding house. Her dark eyes widened at sight of Jack. She pressed a cloth bundle into his hands. "Food," she whispered urgently. "Bread, jerky, water. You'll need it." She slipped a folded scrap of paper into his palm as well. "They're planning to cut you off at Devil's Gulch." Jack's brow furrowed. "Why help us?" Rosa glanced over her shoulder. "Because I know what Silas does to women. Emily is safer with you than with him." Her voice trembled, but her gaze held steady. "Go, hurry." Jack gave a grateful nod. "You're braver than most men I know." By the time he returned to the canyon, Emily had already tilted her head, listening. "That was Rosa, wasn't it? I heard the jingle of her earrings." Jack blinked. "You recognized her from that?" "And from the way she walks. Rosa favors her left foot." Emily smiled faintly. "She was kind to me when no one else was." Jack unwrapped the bundle, handed her a piece of bread. "She says they'll be waiting at Devil's Gulch." Emily took the bread, thoughtful. Then, as if suddenly remembering, she asked, "How many men wear spurs with a double jingle in this town?" Jack frowned. "Double jingle? I heard it earlier today, near the courthouse," Emily explained. "Heavy boots dragging a little, and the spurs clink twice. That wasn't Silas, and not the sheriff. Someone else in his pay." Jack's chest tightened. She was hearing dangers he hadn't noticed. "You may not see Emily," he said slowly, "but you hear more than anyone I've ever met." Her blind eyes turned toward him, pale in the starlight. "Then trust me. They're closer than you think." The night deepened around the canyon stars, scattering across the desert skyway. Jack spread his blanket on the ground, offering Emily the softer half, while he sat close to the fire. The flames licked upward, throwing shadows against the stone walls. Emily held the bread Rosa had given her, tearing small pieces, gowing in silence. After a time, she lifted her head. "You haven't asked why I trusted you," she said. Jack looked across the fire. "Didn't figure it mattered. You had a choice, stay or ride." "It mattered to me," Emily replied softly. "All my life people decided for me. My aunt, the sheriff, the townsfolk, even Silas. But when you came, I could choose. That's why I whispered what I did." Her words sank into him, heavier than the night air. Jack fed another stick to the fire, its pop echoing. "Truth is," he admitted, "I wasn't sure I'd ride in at all. I almost kept going. But then I saw you standing there, cane in hand, and the way they looked at you, like you were already property. Couldn't let it stand." Emily's fingers tightened around her cane. Most men would have looked the other way. Jack gave a small shrug. "Maybe I'm not most men." For a while only the fire spoke, crackling. Then Emily tilted her head, eyes narrowing as if listening to something far off. "Someone's out there," she whispered. Jack stiffened. "Where?" "East Ridge." Heavy boots dragging the double jingle again. Jack cursed under his breath. He slipped to shadow, checked his revolver, and waited. The sound faded, then vanished into the wind. "They're scouting," he muttered, returning. "Silas's men want to box us in." Emily's lips pressed tight. "Devil's Gulch." He nodded. "That's where they'll try." By dawn, they were already riding west. The mesa stretched in endless browns and reds, mesquite bushes clawing the horizon. The sun burned white, the air thick with dust. Emily clung to Shadow's mane, whispering his name now and then. Each time the stallion flicked his ears steady beneath her. She had begun to trust the rhythm. "Tell me what you hear," Jack asked as they trotted along a dry wash. She listened. 2 hawks overhead. The cry bounces, says, "There's water nearby, maybe a spring." Jack grinned. "You're better than any scout I've ridden with." But the smile didn't last. On the horizon, clouds of brown dust began to rise. "Riders. They've found us," Jack muttered. He spurred Shadow into a gallop. The storm of hooves closed fast. Emily felt the vibration through the saddle, the thunder of pursuit. Panic rose in her chest, but Jack's arm tightened around her waist. "Hold on, Emily. Just listen to me." Ahead, the desert shimmered with a curtain of dust, wind swirling wild. A storm was rolling in. Jack cursed but drove toward it. "It'll cover us," he said. "But it'll blind me, too." Emily turned her face into the wind braid, whipping. "Then let me guide you." Jack hesitated, but there was no time. He loosened the reins, trusting her words. "Left," she shouted above the roar. The echoes, close rocks ahead. Shadow veered sharply. A pursuing rider wasn't so lucky. His horse stumbled against boulders, a cry lost in the storm. "Now straight. Feel the wind shift. There's a hollow to the right." Jack leaned with her command, driving Shadow through swirling grit. The dust tore at his eyes, but Emily, blind already, was untouched by its fury. She heard what others could not. The hollows of stone, the clatter of hooves bouncing off walls, the whistle of wind through narrow cuts. "Duck!" she cried suddenly. Jack bent low as Shadow shot under a low overhang, the storm muffling their escape. Behind them, riders cursed, unable to follow without sight. They burst into clearer air on the far side, lungs burning. Jack pulled Shadow to a halt, chest heaving. He looked at Emily in awe. "You just saved us." She caught her breath, smiling faintly despite the grit on her face. "Maybe I can't see the world, Jack, but I can hear it." By evening, they had reached another canyon, this one narrower, safer. Jack set camp, while Emily traced knots in her cord, marking distance in her mind. "We can't keep running forever," Jack said at last, voice low. "Silas won't stop. Neither will the law." Emily turned toward him, blind eyes reflecting firelight. "Then we don't run forever. We just run far enough until they can't find us." Jack studied her, surprised by the steel in her tone. For the first time he wondered if it wasn't him saving her, but her saving him. The fire crackled low, its embers painting the canyon walls in shades of copper and ember red. Night pressed close, stars brilliant above, while Shadow grazed quietly nearby, his ears twitching at unseen movements. Jack sat with his back against a rock, hat tilted low, sharpening his knife by firelight. Across from him, Emily held her cane across her knees. She faced the fire as though she could see it, her blind eyes reflecting sparks she could not witness. After the long silence of travel, her voice came soft but steady. "Why did you do it?" Jack looked up. "Do what? Ride into town? Risk everything for me?" Her hands tightened on the cane. "You didn't even know me." Jack exhaled slowly, setting the knife down. "You deserve the truth." He shifted elbows on his knees, gaze fixed on the flames. "I've been running most of my life. Running from my own name." Emily tilted her head. "What name, Colton?" Jack said bitterly. "Means nothing to most, but in some places it carries shame. My father wore gray in the war. He believed in honor in a cause already dying. When it all fell apart, he was captured, paroled, then accused of cowardice. Died in disgrace." The fire popped. Jack's jaw worked as he forced the words. "My brother Jed took it hard. He swore to reclaim the name no matter the cost. Became a bounty hunter, ruthless, unbending. Me, I couldn't stomach it. I left. Became a drifter. Folks say I deserted my family, same as father deserted the cause." Emily listened, her brow furrowing. "And now Jed hunts you." Jack nodded, shadows deepening on his face. He thinks bringing me in, alive or dead, will wash the Colton name clean. Sooner or later he'll find us. That's what I'm running from. For a long moment, there was only the sigh of wind through the canyon grass. Then Emily spoke again, voice quiet, but edged with steel. Maybe you didn't just run. Maybe you chose. Jack frowned. What do you mean? I've listened to enough men to know when they're lying. Silas lies every time he smiles. My aunt lies with every breath. But you, she leaned forward slightly, eyes blank, but fixed on him. You don't lie. You chose not to become like them. That isn't running. That's refusing. Her words struck something deep, though Jack said nothing. He only stirred the fire with a stick, watching sparks whirl upward. Emily waited, then continued, her voice lower now. There is something you need to know. Jack's head lifted. What is it? She drew a breath. Back in Redstone before the auction, I overheard Silas and Aunt Martha in the parlor. They thought I was asleep, but I heard every word. The marriage. Her voice trembled, but grew firm again. Was never real. It was a trick. A contract to transfer my land, my inheritance to Silas. Once it was signed, I would have been locked away in some home forgotten. Jack stiffened, anger flashing in his eyes. So that's the game. Emily nodded. I was only ever the means. My blindness made me easy to sell. They spoke of me like cattle. Jack's fists clenched on his knees. Damn them both. His voice was low, dangerous. If I'd left you there, you'd be nothing more than property on Brand's ledger. Emily's lips pressed together, a tremor running through her hands. I've always been a burden to them. But to hear it so plain. Jack rose suddenly, pacing near the fire, boots grinding in the dust. His anger felt like heat rolling off him. They won't get away with it. Not Silas, not your aunt, not the sheriff backing them. Emily turned her face toward him, her voice calm, though her heart pounded. Jack, I didn't tell you so you'd fight. I told you because now you understand why I had to trust you. You didn't see me as land to be signed away. You saw me. The firelight softened his expression. He looked at her, then really looked, and for the first time since lifting her onto Shadow's saddle, he understood the weight of what she had given him, trust freely chosen. Emily, he said, voice rough, I swear to you, they'll never use you again. Not while I breathe. She smiled faintly, though tears traced her cheeks. Then maybe neither of us is running anymore. The gorge narrowed into a throat of sound, its walls sheer and sun-bleached. Shadow's hooves echoed as Jack guided him carefully forward, Emily sitting straight before him. The air smelled of hot dust and iron. Something in Jack's gut twisted tight. Emily tilted her head, her blind eyes searching the air. They're waiting. Jack slowed. Where up ahead, she whispered. Boots scuffing gravel, a belt creaking, and metal. A revolver being cocked. Before Jack could reply, a voice bellowed from the rocks. End of the trail, Colton. Sheriff Dugan stepped into the open, his belly straining against the leather vest, revolver raised. Behind him, 2 deputies spread out across the stone ledges. Jack's jaw hardened. He swung down from Shadow, pulling Emily gently with him, keeping her behind his arm. Hand her over, Dugan said, sweat glistening on his forehead. You're under arrest for theft, desertion, and disturbing the peace. Don't make me add resisting. Jack's hand hovered near his holster. You're hiding behind false charges, Sheriff. You know damn well Silas bought you. Dugan flushed but sneered. Law's the law. You draw on me, Colton, and you'll swing for murder too. Emily's hand tightened on Jack's sleeve. She heard the scrape of boots above the nervous clicks of hammers pulled back. Her voice was urgent, low. Jack, don't. For a breath, Jack weighed at the fire in his chest, demanding he draw the feel of Emily's grip holding him back. Then with a sharp motion, he pulled his revolver, fired, crack. The bullet smashed the rock beside Dugan's boot, scattering chips. The sheriff stumbled back, cursing, gun trembling. Jack leveled his pistol again, eyes blazing. He could end it now. One squeeze, and the lawmen who sold justice for silver would never trouble them again. But Emily's voice cut through like a bell. Don't be like them. Her words held more weight than bullets. Jack's jaw worked, then slowly he lowered the gun. He stepped back, shoving the weapon into its holster. Dugan gasped, furious, but alive. His deputies whispered nervously, unsettled by the mercy. Jack spat into the dust. You'll answer for what you've done, Sheriff. But not by my hand. Before the moment could shift, another voice slid from the canyon shadows, low, steady, and all too familiar to Jack. Mercy, little brother. Always your weakness. From the ridge rode Jack Colton, rifle across his saddle. His figure was like a darker mirror of Jack, broad shoulders, sharp jaw, but with the hard eyes of a man who had chosen law without kindness. He dismounted, boots crunching, gaze fixed on Jack. Jed, Jack muttered, anger and regret tangled. Emily sensed the shift instantly. Your brother, she whispered. Jed nodded, slow and cold. Jack Colton. Wanted for desertion, theft, and now abduction. The bounty's mine. Jack stepped forward. You don't have to do this. Jed's face was stone. I do. Father's name is dirt. You ran when honor called. I'll set it right. Emily clutched her cane, voice cutting sharp. Honor? You'd call this honor? Helping Silas Brand steal land, helping a sheriff who sells justice. Jed's eyes flickered just for a breath. But he didn't answer. Jack's voice rose. I didn't run from honor, Jed. I ran from lies. You just can't see it. The canyon seemed to hold its breath. Then Jed moved closer to Emily, his tone dropping so only she could hear. He saved you, yes. But he's guilty too. Don't blind yourself to that. Emily's chest tightened. The words wormed into her heart like poison. For the first time, doubt stirred. Jack had saved her. She knew that with all her being. But what if his past was darker than he admitted? She turned her face away, hiding the turmoil. Jed stepped back, signaling his horse. Think on it, girl. Think hard. Jack's fists clenched at his sides, but he didn't move. The canyon swallowed them in silence as Jed mounted and rode off, leaving behind only dust and doubt. Emily sat stiff, the echo of his whisper lingering. She didn't want to believe him, but the seed of fear had been planted, and Jack saw it in her face. The path to Devil's Gulch wound like a serpent through the mesas, its walls painted blood red by the sinking sun. Jack rode cautiously, shadows' hooves ringing against stone, while Emily sat before him, cane tucked tight across her lap. The silence between them had grown heavier since Jed's parting words. She still felt the echo of his whisper. He saved you, but he's guilty too. Jack sensed her unease, though he said nothing. He simply tightened his arm around her waist whenever the trail narrowed, a sullen promise she couldn't yet believe fully. By twilight, they reached the mouth of the gulch. A campfire blazed within, shadows flickering across riders, waiting in a semicircle. At their center, astride a glossy black gelding, sat Silas Brand. His coat gleamed like fresh tar, his hat tilted low. His grin was too wide, too eager. Well, well, Silas called, his voice booming against the stone. Look who rode straight into my parlor. Jack reined shadow to a halt, jaw set. If you wanted a fight, Brand, you should have come straight, not hiding behind rocks. Silas raised both hands theatrically. No fight, boy. Not tonight. I offer terms. A truce. Emily stiffened. Her head tilted, blind eyes scanning the air. Her lips parted. Jack, she whispered, too many horses. I hear more than a dozen. Spurs jangling against rock. Some behind us. Jack cursed under his breath. The gulch was a box, and they were penned inside. terms Jack asked, stalling. Silas gestured, and from a wagon at the rear a woman stepped forward. Martha Warren, Emily's aunt. Her parasol gone, her face pinched and triumphant. She carried a folder of papers, ink already smudged at the corners. Emily's breath caught. Aunt Martha. Martha's voice rang thin but sharp. Emily, child, you've made this much harder than it needed to be. If you'd only behaved, all this unpleasantness could have been avoided. Behaved, is? Emily's voice shook with fury. You mean obeyed? Sold myself like land. Martha sniffed. It's what's best. Silas provides. You'd have a roof, obeyed attendance. Better than fumbling in the dark breaking china. Silas chuckled, leaning in his saddle. She's right, girl. I don't want a wife. I want your deed. And she's giving it to me. Before Emily could reply, Martha bent to the papers, signing with quick strokes. The sheriff Dugan stepped forward, with his thick fingers stamping the seal of Redstone onto the contract. His smile gleamed. There, Dugan crowed. By law, the land is Brand's, and the girl, she's his ward. He turned to Jack, eyes cruel. And you, Colton, are nothing but a thief of another man's property. Jack's temper flared hot, but before he could draw a lasso, snapped tight around his chest. Shadow reared, neighing, as Jack was yanked to the ground. 3 men pounced, wrenching his arms behind his back, binding him fast with rawhide. Emily screamed, reaching blindly. A rough hand seized her arm, twisting it. Silas leaned down, eyes glinting. So fragile, he whispered. One wrong move and you'll break. Best keep quiet. Dugan swaggered over, Jack, revolver dangling casually. Law's on our side, boy. Ain't no use fighting it. Jack spat dust, his chest heaving against the ropes. His eyes burned toward Emily, helpless. Emily's heart pounded like a war drum. She fought to steady her breath, to listen. Through the rattle of spurs, the crackle of fire, she caught it, a whisper. Out quick, threaded through the chaos. Emily, don't move. It's Rosa. Emily's head jerked slightly. The inmate. The girl who had brought them bread. I'll cut him loose, Rosa hissed from somewhere behind the wagon, when the fire flares pushed left. Emily swallowed hard, then sagged in the grip of Silas's man, feigning weakness. Her cane clattered to the dust. She whispered faintly, I can't fight. I can't even stand. Silas smirked, nodding to Dugan. See, helpless. That's why she needs me. But in the shadows, Rosa slid behind Jack, knife flashing as it sawed through rawhide. Jack felt the fibers loosen. His pulse surged. He met Emily's blank gaze, and though she couldn't see, she seemed to sense the change. Her chin lifted, ready. Now Rosa breathed, shoving him free. Jack exploded upward, shoulder ramming into Dugan's gut. The sheriff toppled with a grunt, revolver flying. Jack's fist slammed into another man's jaw, dropping him. Emily, Jack shouted. She ducked and rolled as Silas's grip faltered, cane snatched from the ground to strike blindly. It cracked against a shin. The man howled. Chaos erupted. Men drew pistols, shouts echoing, horses screaming. Rosa darted in, dragging Emily behind a wagon. Jack seized a fallen rifle, leveling it across the fire. But before lead flew, another rider stormed into the gulch. Enough. It was Jack Colton, rifle high, eyes blazing. His voice thundered across the canyon. I've seen enough of this charade. The riders hesitated. Even Dugan froze, clutching his stomach. Jed dismounted, boots pounding hard. He shoved Silas aside, fury written in every line of his face. You call this honor? Threatening women, stealing land. He spat at the papers Martha clutched. This isn't law, it's rot. Silas sneered, recovering. Don't preach bounty, man. You came for your brother's hide. Jed turned, gaze searing into Jack. For a moment, the air hung heavy with choice. Then Jed swung his rifle, not at Jack, but at Silas's men. You want the girl, you'll ride through me first. Gasps erupted. Silas's smug mask cracked. Jed, Jack breathed, stunned. Emily, clutching Rosa's hand, whispered, "He chose." The gulch roared into motion. Silas's men surged, but Jed and Jack fought shoulder to shoulder, fists and rifle butts swinging, driving them back. Horses reared, dust blinding. Dugan scrambled for his revolver, only to find Shadow's hooves crashing down inches from his face, Jack's stallion rearing with fury. Emily crouched low, guided Rosa with sharp commands. "Left one coming. Hear the spurs behind you." Rosa swung a heavy branch, striking true. Within minutes, the tide shifted. Silas, blood on his lip, realized his men were faltering. He snarled, leapt to his saddle, and bolted into the night. Dugan staggered after him, wheezing curses. Martha shrieked, papers scattering like broken promise. Silence settled. Smoke curled from the dying bar. The gulch smelled of sweat, dust, and fear. Jack stood, heaving, rope marks raw on his wrists. Jed leaned on his rifle, breath ragged. For the first time in years, the brothers looked at one another, not as enemies, but as men bound by choice. Emily rose slowly, guided by Rosa, her cane tapping the ground, until she reached Jack. She touched his arm, her blind eyes wet, but steady. "You're free," she whispered. Jack covered her hand with his voice rough. "Because of you." And for the first time, Jed didn't argue you. He only lowered his rifle, muttering, "Because of all of us." The church stood on the far edge of Redstone, its adobe walls glowing pale in the dawn light. Jack and Emily arrived, weary, shadow, lathered with sweat, dust streaking their clothes. Jed trailed behind, silent, but watchful. Father O'Rourke met them at the door, his silver hair haloed by the morning sun. His lined face softened with relief when he saw Emily, then tightened with worry. "Child," he murmured, guiding her gently inside, "you should not be here. The law still hunts you both." "We've nowhere else," Jack said, his voice rough. "We need shelter, Father, just until we can decide." The priest studied him, then nodded. "This house is God's. You are safety for now." But his eyes betrayed the fear he carried, fear of lawmen, battering down holy doors. Inside, the air smelled of wax and cedar. Emily sank onto a pew, fingers trailing across the worn wood. She whispered, "It feels peaceful." Jack sat beside her, his arm brushing hers, drawing strength from the stillness. For a rare moment, he allowed hope to flicker. But Jed stood apart, leaning against a column, his face shadowed. At last he spoke. "Jack." His tone carried the weight of finality. "You know this can't last. You drag her down with you. Best leave her here. Let O'Rourke see her safe." Jack stiffened. "I won't abandon her." Jed's eyes hardened. "You think you're saving her, but you're not. She'll live, hunted, branded, the wife of a fugitive. That's no life for a blind girl." Emily lifted her head, her blind eyes turned toward Jed's voice. "A blind girl? Is that all you see?" Jed faltered. Emily rose slowly, cane tapping against the flagstone, her voice steady as a bell. "All my life, I was told I was broken, a burden. But Jack never said that. He never looked at me with pity. He saw me as whole, as capable. That's why I choose him. Not safety, not law. Him." Her words rang through the chapel, silencing even Jed. Jack's chest swelled, pride and love mixing until his throat ached. "You hear that, brother? She chooses. Not me, not you. Her." Jed turned away, jaw tight, wrestling with something deep inside. Before more could be said, the church doors burst open. Sheriff Dugan stormed in, revolver drawn, Silas Brand striding at his side. Dust and fury clung to them like armor. "This ends now," Dugan barked. "Colton, you're finished." Silas sneered, his lips still cut from the gulch fight. "And the girl returns to me, land and all. The papers are signed. She belongs to me by law." Father O'Rourke stepped forward, planting himself between the altar and the intruders. "This is holy ground. Dugan shoved him aside with a snarl. Law stands above holy ground. The moment cracked like dry timber. Jed looked from Jack to the sheriff, then to Silas. His breath came hard, his decision balanced on a knife's edge. Then with sudden clarity he stepped to Jack's side, rifle raised. If you want him, Sheriff, you'll ride through me too. Dugan cursed. Traitor. Chaos erupted. Silas drew his gun, aiming for Jack. Emily, standing near the pew, tilted her head sharply. She heard it, the scrape of boot leather, the intake of breath, the click of hammer pulled back. Right side, Jack, she cried. Jack spun, firing. His bullet shattered the lamp above Silas's head. The glass burst, flames spilling across the sheriff's desk of papers. Silas stumbled, blinded by sparks, cursing. Left by the rail, Emily shouted again, her ears catching the shuffle of Dugan's boots. Jack pivoted, slamming his fist into the sheriff's jaw before the revolver could fire. Dugan crashed against the altar, his badge clattering to the floor. The congregation, villagers who had followed, drawn by the commotion, gasped from the doorway. They saw their sheriff scrambling in the dirt, his corruption laid bare. They saw Silas, once untouchable, swatting flames from his coat like a common criminal. Jed leveled his rifle. Enough, Brand. Your game's over. Silas's eyes darted wildly, searching for an ally, but found none. He spat into the dust, then fled through the side door, his boots clanging against the stones. Dugan groaned, clutching his swollen jaw, no power left in his hands. The silence that followed was thick, broken only by Emily's steady breathing. She stood tall, cane in hand, her blind eyes lifted as though she could see them all. She guided me, Jack said hoarsely, looking around at the townsfolk. She saved us both. Blind maybe in eyes, but not in spirit. She sees clearer than any of you. A murmur rippled through the crowd, guilt, awe, the stirring of truth. Father O'Rourke stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. You've witnessed enough. The law failed, but grace endures. Bless this union and let them go free. He turned to Jack and Emily, placing his weathered hands upon their bowed heads. Go. Build the life denied you here. Jack swallowed hard. Then he turned to Emily, kneeling before her. With reverence, he lifted her into his arms. She gasped softly, then clung to him, her cheek against his shoulder. Outside, shadows stamped impatiently. Jack carried her through the church doors into the sunlight, where the whole town now watched. He placed her upon the saddle, then swung up behind her. For a moment, he paused, hat in hand, facing the crowd. Father O'Rourke raised his hand in blessing. May the Lord guard your steps, right into freedom. Jack settled his hat, wrapped an arm around Emily, and touched his heels to Shadow's flanks. The stallion surged forward, hooves pounding the dust. Emily held her cane high, the sun catching it like a banner. Gasps followed, then silence, as the figures of horse and riders dwindled against the blazing horizon. The town would remember that image for years, a blind girl lifted by a cowboy's arms, carried into the sunset, not as burden, but as chosen companion. And Jack felt it in his bones, the truth he had run from all his life. He wasn't saving her. They were saving each other. When I think about Emily and Jack, I don't just see a love story from the old frontier. I see two souls the world had cast aside, one called broken, the other, branded a coward, choosing each other when no one else would. That's the heart of the West to me, not the gunfights or the dust, but the courage to say, I see you and I choose you, no matter the odds. Maybe that's why their ride into the sunset still lingers, because in the end, it reminds us all sometimes the greatest freedom is being loved exactly as we are.